The sound of a glass shattering was the first thing that pulled me out of the haze. Not the music, not the laughter, not even the cake I never got to cut. A glass dropped right in front of me, like a warning sign I couldn't read in time. Marlene's hand was shaking when she picked it up, and I swear her eyes weren't looking at me. She was looking past me, at him. Bryce. Always Bryce. The night was spinning long before the party even began, but I didn't see it then. The decorations, the lights, the way everyone smiled at me felt off. It wasn't a celebration, it was a stage, and I was the guy who didn't know he was the punchline. She laughed that way again. That laugh. The one I used to think was mine. I stood there with a half drink in my hand, realizing that she hadn't laughed like that at anything I said in months. Bryce whispered something, and she doubled over, nearly touching his chest like it was some kind of reflex. People around them clapped, like they were watching a show. And maybe they were. When I finally tried to step in, to ask her to come talk to me for just a minute, she brushed my hand off with this distracted smile, like I was interrupting something important. Later, Harold, she said. Later. At my own birthday party. That's when I felt it. That slow, sinking feeling in your stomach when you realize you're not the main character in your own story anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just walked over to the kitchen counter, saw a knife next to the cake, and for a second, I thought about cutting it myself. But no one was watching me. They were all watching them. And then, I left. No words. No goodbyes. I drove home with that sound still echoing in my head. The glass breaking, her laugh blending into it, like the sound of something precious snapping in two. When she came home hours later, mascara smudged and heels in her hand, she wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She fell to her knees in the hallway and begged me to listen. When Marlene stumbled through the door, it was as if time froze for a moment. Her hair was messy, her lipstick was smudged, and she looked at me like I was both the villain and the only lifeline she had left. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, still wearing the shirt she bought me for the party, now wrinkled from hours of me gripping it with sweaty hands. I didn't even know what I wanted to say, but I knew whatever was coming would ruin me. She dropped her heels on the floor with a heavy thud and started crying. Not the quiet kind of crying where you hide your face and wait for someone to comfort you. No, this was loud, messy, and filled with a kind of desperation that made my stomach twist. Harold, please just listen to me, she said, her voice cracking. I wanted to yell at her, to ask what the hell she thought she was doing with Bryce all night, but something in her face stopped me. It was fear, real fear. She sat down on the floor, right there in front of me, like she couldn't even trust herself to sit on the couch. I didn't mean for tonight to go like that, she began, clutching her knees. You don't understand. Bryce isn't just some guy from work. She stopped, closed her eyes, shook her head. No, I can't tell you yet. It'll ruin everything. That single sentence lit a fire inside me. Ruin everything? What was there left to ruin? My birthday was a public humiliation. My trust was already shattered, and now she was hiding something bigger? I stood up, pacing like a caged animal. Marlene, you better start explaining, because right now I feel like the biggest fool on this planet. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, and for a second, I thought she was going to lie. But then she said something that nearly knocked the air out of my lungs. Bryce was never supposed to be there. I invited him, but not for me. It was for you. I laughed. I actually laughed because it sounded insane. For me? What? Is this some kind of twisted gift? You invite another guy to flirt with you in front of me? Is this a test? Because guess what, Marlene? I failed. I walked out. My voice cracked on the last word. I hated how weak I sounded, how pathetic I must have looked standing there, shaking, while she stayed on the floor like a fallen angel with broken wings. She whispered something, so softly I barely caught it. It's worse than you think. He knows about us. About what I've done. I froze. What you've done? I repeated. My mind raced with every horrible possibility. Had she cheated? Was Bryce some blackmailer? I couldn't tell if this was fear, guilt, or both clawing at her. She grabbed my hand suddenly, so tightly it hurt. Please, Harold. Just let me explain everything. But not tonight. If I start now, you'll hate me more than you already do. Just give me until tomorrow. I swear, you'll understand. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, my mind split between wanting to scream and wanting to crawl into a hole. The silence in the house was unbearable, like every tick of the clock was mocking me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur, wondering what kind of nightmare I had stepped into. And I couldn't stop asking myself the same question. What does Bryce know that I don't? I couldn't wait until tomorrow. Marlene's vague promises about some truth only made the poison in my mind worse. After she finally cried herself to sleep in the guest room, I sat in the living room staring at her phone on the counter. I had never gone through her phone before. I used to think that if you needed to do that, your marriage was already over. But at 3:12 a.m., while the house was silent except for the hum of the fridge, I picked it up and started scrolling like a man possessed. There were messages from Bryce. Dozens. The first thing I noticed was how far back they went. 6 months. They started as casual work conversations, then slowly blurred into something strange. Not flirty, not romantic, but something else entirely. I found one message from a week ago that stopped me cold. Does he still not know? You can't hide this forever, Marlene. He has a right to find out. My hands were trembling as I read her reply. Not yet. He's not ready. I'll tell him after his birthday. I promise. I dropped the phone like it burned me. Not ready for what? I thought I'd already imagined the worst, but the ambiguity of those messages somehow felt worse than any confession. Was this about me? About us? About something she'd done? My mind went into overdrive. The next morning, I didn't talk to her. I left before she woke up, driving aimlessly until I ended up in front of Bryce's office building. I'd never met the guy before last night, but I knew from the messages that he worked in advertising on the east side of town. I parked across the street and waited like some deranged stalker. Around 9 a.m., he walked out, tall, sharp suit, carrying a coffee like his life was perfectly in order. I wanted to storm across the street and demand answers, but what was I supposed to say? Hey, I'm the husband of the woman you were making sing karaoke with you last night. What the hell are you hiding from me? Instead, I followed him. I can't believe I'm even admitting this, but I trailed him for half an hour, watching him walk into a cafe, greet some woman, and sit down like nothing in the world was wrong. It was surreal. This man who suddenly had a chokehold on my life didn't even know I was watching him, burning holes into the back of his head with my eyes. I left before I did something stupid. When I got home, Marlene was waiting at the kitchen table. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her coffee was cold, untouched. We need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Then talk. I'm done waiting. She hesitated, tears filling her eyes again. Bryce isn't who you think he is, and I'm not who you think I am either. She paused, like she was bracing for impact. Harold, I've been keeping something from you since before we got married. Something that was supposed to stay buried, but Bryce found out. I felt my knees go weak. Before I could even ask what she meant, she whispered the words that made my stomach turn to ice. Bryce knows about New Orleans. About what happened that night. And if you knew the whole story, you'd probably leave me. I had no idea what she was talking about. New Orleans? We'd never been there together. My brain scrambled, trying to connect dots that weren't there. What night? What are you talking about? I demanded. She just shook her head and said, I'll tell you everything, but you're not going to like who I was before you met me. I sat down because I couldn't trust my legs anymore. Marlene's voice was steady, but there was something in her eyes that told me I wasn't ready for what she was about to say. Before I met you, she started, I wasn't this person. I wasn't the Marlene you think you know. I had a life in New Orleans, a life I never wanted to talk about. She looked away, as if the mere mention of the city left a bad taste in her mouth. I wanted to interrupt, to demand answers, but I stayed silent. She took a long breath, like she was bracing herself to open a locked door. I was 24, broke, and reckless. I got mixed up with the wrong people. People who didn't take no for an answer. I did things I'm not proud of, Harold. I was trying to survive. I left all of it behind when I moved here. I thought it was over. But Bryce, he knows about it. He was there, that night. He's been holding it over me. Her words hit me like bullets. Bryce wasn't just some coworker. He was someone from her past, someone who had seen a version of my wife I didn't know existed. So what? He's blackmailing you? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Marlene shook her head. Not exactly. It's worse. He says if I don't tell you everything, he will. He knows I've built my whole life around keeping that past buried. If you knew what I did that night, you'd never look at me the same way again. She swallowed hard, and for the first time since I met her, she looked truly afraid of me, afraid of what I might think, what I might do if I heard the full story. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Then tell me. Stop dragging this out, and just tell me what happened. She shook her head violently. No, not now. Not like this. You're already angry. If I dump everything on you, you'll walk out the door before I even finish. I need you to promise me you'll listen, really listen, when I tell you everything. I wanted to scream, but instead, I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the street as if the answers were written there. My mind was spinning. I thought this was just about Bryce flirting with my wife, but now there was something darker lurking under the surface. You've been lying to me for our entire marriage, I said quietly. And now I'm supposed to just trust you to tell me the truth? Marlene's voice cracked. I wasn't lying, Harold. I was protecting you. Protecting us. My past, it's not just ugly. It's dangerous. That word, dangerous, stuck with me. I turned to look at her, and for the first time, I realized she was shaking. This wasn't just guilt. This was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Bryce isn't just some guy from work, she whispered. He was there that night. He knows things I wish I could erase from my memory. If he wanted to, he could destroy both of us. I stared at her, my mind filled with questions I couldn't form into words. Why would Bryce wait until now to show up? Why come to my birthday, of all nights, and parade himself like that? Something about this felt orchestrated, like I was being pushed toward an edge I didn't even know existed. Then Marlene looked at me with eyes that seemed to plead for my soul. If I tell you the truth about New Orleans, about Bryce, you have to promise me something. I hesitated. Promise you what? Promise me you won't hate me when you find out who I really am. The air between us felt like a loaded gun, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. Marlene sat across from me, pale and trembling, her coffee long gone cold, untouched. I had never seen her like this, not on the day her father died, not during the darkest arguments of our marriage. There was a hollowness in her voice, like she was about to confess something that could shatter everything we had left. I waited, bracing for whatever storm was coming, and when she finally spoke, her words were slow and heavy, like they'd been chained inside her for years. Harold, the night in New Orleans wasn't just some mistake I can shrug off. It was the worst night of my life, and the one I've been running from ever since. Her eyes locked onto mine with this pleading look that almost made me want to tell her to stop. But I needed to hear it. I needed to know who the woman I married really was. She leaned back in her chair, fingers gripping the armrest so tightly I thought they might break. I was desperate back then. I had no money, no job, no one to call. I started working at this club, a high-end place where the lines between business and danger blurred. I wasn't doing anything illegal, not at first. I was just a hostess, keeping clients entertained. But that night, the night Bryce is talking about, things went wrong. There was a man, a client who got violent. I tried to get away, but he wouldn't let me. Bryce was there. He saw everything. And he did something to stop it. Something I never asked him to do. That night ended with blood on the floor. Harold. Real blood. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. I didn't know whether to comfort her or recoil. What do you mean, blood? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She shook her head. You don't get it. Bryce didn't just step in to defend me. He went too far. That man, he didn't leave the club alive. And Bryce made me swear I'd never tell a soul. We left New Orleans the next morning. We never went back. I built a new life here. I thought he'd vanished. But now he's back, and I don't know why. Maybe he wants something. Maybe he's angry I moved on. But he's not the same person you saw last night. He's dangerous, Harold. The kind of dangerous that doesn't go away. I sank into the couch, my hands pressed against my face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife, the woman who spends her Sundays watching baking shows and complaining about our neighbor's ugly lawn ornaments, was now telling me there's a violent past tied to a man who just stood in my living room like he owned the place. Marlene, are you saying Bryce killed someone? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. And I let him. I was scared. I told myself it was self-defense. I told myself it wasn't my fault. But I saw what he did, Harold. I saw what he's capable of. And if he's back now, it's not just to say hello. He wants something, and if we don't figure out what, he'll make our lives hell. I stared at her, my mind spinning. I didn't know whether to be angry, horrified, or terrified. All I knew was that the life I thought I had, the safe, boring, predictable life, was gone. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, with no idea how far the drop went. What if he tells the police? I asked, thinking out loud. She shook her head again. Bryce won't go to the police. That would drag him down, too. No, this is about control. He's here because he knows I'll do anything to keep you from finding out. But now you know, and that changes everything. I looked at her, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't know if I could trust her. Not because of what she did, but because I had no idea what kind of hell was waiting for us now that Bryce was back in our lives. And deep down, a single thought kept gnawing at me, refusing to let go. If Marlene was capable of hiding this from me for years, what else had she buried? The next 2 days felt like living with a stranger. Marlene barely spoke, and when she did, her voice trembled as though every word could shatter the thin layer of calm holding us together. I kept replaying what she told me about New Orleans, every detail gnawing at my mind, but something didn't add up. If Bryce had really killed someone and helped her escape that night, why would he suddenly decide to reappear now? Why at my birthday? Why flaunt himself like some kind of twisted hero in front of everyone? It didn't feel random. It felt orchestrated, calculated in a way that made me sick to my stomach. On the third morning, I got my answer, or at least a piece of it. There was an envelope waiting on our front porch. No postage, no name, just my own name scrawled in messy black ink. I opened it standing right there by the door, and my blood ran cold. Inside was a photo, Marlene and Bryce together, sitting at some cheap diner booth. The timestamp in the corner said 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. My mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. She'd been lying to me, not just about the past, but about right now. Underneath the photo was a single line written in that same ugly black ink. You deserve to know the truth. Call me before she spins more lies. And then, a phone number. No signature. I walked inside, shaking, holding the envelope like it was radioactive. Marlene was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, drinking coffee, her face pale and tired. I dropped the photo in front of her. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice breaking more than I wanted it to. She looked down at it, and for a second, I thought she might faint. She pressed her hand to her mouth and muttered, "Oh God, he promised me he wouldn't." What? I snapped. He promised you he wouldn't what? Show me the truth? Because this, I pointed to the photo, this doesn't look like ancient history to me. This looks like 2 weeks ago, Marlene. 2 weeks ago, while I was sitting at home thinking you were out with your sister. She buried her face in her hands. It's not what you think, Harold. I met him because he threatened me. He found me. He said if I didn't meet him, he'd start showing you things, digging into everything. I only met him to try and make him stop. That's the truth. I swear. Her voice cracked, but I didn't care. My mind was already spiraling. So you've been lying to me again, I said, stepping back from the table. All these years, and now even this month you're sneaking around with this guy, trying to protect me, while making me look like an idiot? I hated how my voice sounded. High, tight, almost pitiful. But I couldn't stop. Do you realize how humiliating it is to have this man show up at my birthday, in front of everyone, and act like he owns the room? And now I find out you've been meeting him behind my back. She stood up so fast the chair toppled over. You think I wanted this? You think I asked for him to come back into my life? I've spent years terrified that this day would come. I thought I could keep you safe by hiding it all, but now he's in control. He wants something from me, Harold, and I don't even know what it is yet. He's playing with both of us. I didn't know if I believed her. Honestly, I didn't know what I believed anymore. My head was spinning with rage and fear and confusion all tangled together. That's when my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. Meet me alone if you want the full story. Tonight, 9 p.m., the parking lot by Miller's Diner. Don't bring her. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. There was no name, but I didn't need one. It was Bryce. And suddenly, I knew I couldn't ignore him anymore. By 9 p.m., my nerves were on fire. I sat in my car in the far corner of Miller's Diner parking lot, the engine off, the dim glow of a flickering streetlight making the whole place look like something out of a bad crime drama. I told Marlene I was going out for a drive to clear my head, but the look she gave me when I left said she knew exactly where I was going. I hated myself for coming here, but the thought of spending another night under the same roof as her, drowning in half-truths and evasive answers, was unbearable. I needed to hear Bryce's side, even if it tore me apart. At 9:07, a sleek black car pulled in and parked 2 spaces away. Bryce stepped out, casual as ever, like this was just another evening for him. He wore a dark jacket, his hair neatly combed, and he smiled at me with that same smug grin I'd seen at my party. "Harold," he said, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. "I was starting to think you wouldn't show." I didn't get out of my car right away. I just sat there, staring at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. Finally, I stepped out, but I stayed by my door, keeping a good distance. "What the hell do you want from us?" I asked. My voice cracked, and I hated how small I sounded compared to his calm, almost amused tone. "What I want," he said, leaning against his car, "is for you to know the truth. Marlene isn't who you think she is. You've built this perfect little image of her, but it's a lie. She's been lying to you since day one. You think New Orleans was just some messy chapter of her life? No, Harold. It was the chapter. She was in deep, deeper than she's ever told you. And the man who died that night, he wasn't just some random guy. He was connected. Dangerous." My mouth went dry. Connected to what? I demanded. Bryce smiled like he was savoring every second of this. "To people you don't want to cross. People who don't forgive. Marlene might have run away, but that doesn't mean they forgot. I've kept her secret for years, but you deserve to know that the woman you're living with isn't just hiding a past. She's hiding enemies. People who'd do anything to find her." I stepped closer, my fists clenched. "Why now? Why show up at my birthday? Why send me that photo? What the hell is your game here?" He shrugged, almost casually. "Because she's been ignoring me. I tried warning her, tried telling her it's only a matter of time before her past catches up. But she refuses to face it. So I figured you should know. Maybe if you understood how serious this is, you'd make her tell the whole story. You'd see who she really is." I wanted to punch him. I wanted to wipe that smug look off his face. But a part of me, the part that had been drowning in questions since that night, knew he wasn't entirely bluffing. I asked suddenly, the words slipping out before I could stop myself. Bryce laughed softly. "This isn't about wanting her. It's about you realizing that you're living in a house built on lies. And when that house collapses, I don't want to be standing under the roof." He paused, leaning in just enough for his voice to drop. "But let me warn you, Harold, if you push her too hard, she'll break. And when she breaks, so will you." I stood there, frozen, as he walked back to his car like he'd just delivered some casual advice, not a threat. He drove away, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my own shallow breathing and the burning question I couldn't shake. Was he telling the truth, or was this just another manipulation? When I got home, Marlene was waiting in the living room, her eyes wide and red, as if she knew exactly what Bryce had said. "Harold," she whispered, "whatever he told you, it's worse than that. And if you don't let me explain everything now, you'll never forgive me." I stood in the doorway, my chest heavy and my mind spinning with Bryce's words. Marlene's face looked smaller somehow, as if she had been holding her breath for days. She stepped toward me, her hands trembling, and for once, I didn't back away. I was done with half-truths and cryptic warnings. "Tell me," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "All of it. No more waiting. No more secrets. If you want this marriage to survive, I need to know everything right now." She nodded, and for the next hour, she told me everything. Her voice cracked more than once, but she never stopped. The New Orleans story, the man who died, Bryce's involvement. It all came out in vivid, painful detail. But there was one thing she said that changed everything for me. "Harold," she whispered, tears streaking down her cheeks, "I never told you because I was ashamed. Not of what Bryce did, but of who I was back then. I was lost, angry, and desperate. I thought if you knew the woman I used to be, you wouldn't want the woman I am now. But everything I've built since then, every moment of happiness we've had, it's because of you. You're the only person who's ever made me feel like I'm worth anything." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. I'd been so angry, so consumed by my own pride, that I forgot why I married her in the first place. I loved her because she wasn't perfect. I loved her because she fought for her life, even if it meant clawing her way out of hell. I realized, in that moment, that Bryce had no power over us unless we let him. He thrived on our silence and fear, and I wasn't going to let that define us. The next day, I called Bryce. My voice was steady when I told him, "Whatever game you're playing, it's over. I know everything. You don't control us anymore." There was silence on the line. And then Bryce laughed softly, like he wasn't expecting me to grow a spine. "We'll see," he muttered, but I didn't care. I hung up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Marlene and I decided to face this together. She agreed to meet with a lawyer to protect herself if Bryce ever tried to drag her into the past legally. We also reached out to a private investigator, someone who could confirm if Bryce was bluffing or if there was still any real danger lurking from those days. To my surprise, Marlene didn't resist. She wanted this nightmare to end as much as I did. It's been 3 weeks since that night, and something incredible happened. The fear that had been strangling our marriage was replaced with a strange but powerful honesty. We talk more now. We laugh again. It's as if surviving this ordeal pulled us closer than we've ever been. Last night, as we sat on the porch with cheap wine and the sound of crickets all around us, Marlene looked at me and said, "You know, for the first time in years, I feel free. And I don't think I'd have gotten here without you." I didn't have a clever response. I just held her hand and realized that sometimes the scariest truths bring the most unexpected healing. Bryce may have tried to break us, but in a twisted way, he made us stronger. And as I looked at her smile under the warm glow of the porch light, I knew one thing for certain. No shadow from her past, no ghost from New Orleans, was ever going to take her away from me.